Since the death of George Floyd earlier this year, the Black Lives Matter movement has gotten a lot of attention from the international public. Many commend the movement for raising awareness on systemic racism across the US. This has raised questions on whether racism is still a problem in today's society and how to eradicate it and fight against it. We've opened this space to talk about racism in Colombia and take a look at our social and political stances regarding it. We intend to clarify the doubts on the existence of racism, its impact in our daily lives, and what we can do to identify it within ourselves.
What is racism? Racism is an ideology system in which people are categorized for different biological characteristics, like their skin tone and their place of origin. This affects certain groups of people around the world, since the discrimination bleeds into every part of their life. Racism in Colombia. Does it exist? When we hear about racism, we often think of it as a problem of other people. We only think of racism as shown in other countries, like the United States, and seldom casts our eye to our own. However, it is necessary to scrutinize both this lack of information and this lack of interest on our part, although it often stems from this belief. According to the observatory, Afro-Colombians are the ethnic group that feels most discriminated in the country, with a percentage of 19.8%, followed by indigenous people 14.2%, people of mixed race 3%, and white people with a 1.9%. Gender discrimination also has part in racism. According to 27.5% of the women interviewed, racism is notorious inside their own homes. None of the men reported a similar situation.
According to the PNUD, Programa de las Naciones Unidas para el Desarrollo, in Colombia, the percentage of Afro-descendant people that suffer from starvation is bigger than that of the non-ethnic population. Nourishment is an indicator of the well-being of a community, but in this group, the numbers look very different from those of the rest of the country. In Chocó, for example, which has the highest number of Afro-descendant people amongst all of the regions, 82%, is one of the four regions where this percentage has worsened in the past decade. Statistics show how bad the situation is for the Afro-descendant community's well-being, which, in Colombian society, is still being affected by blatant discrimination from both the state and the non-ethnic members of the community. We hope that this helps all of us realize that racism does exist and not so far away from ourselves as we like to think. Following, our partners will discuss more about the Afro-Colombian communities and ways in which racism can be subtle and hidden in everyday interactions.
Today, I would like to share some basic ideas about our Afro descent communities in Colombia. To start, we have to know that in Colombia, Afro Colombians make up 6.68% of the population. That means 3 million people, according with DANE. But where are they located? Most of them are located on the Northwest Caribbean coast and the Pacific coast as Chocó, whose capital Quibdó, with 95.3% Afro-Colombian. Considerable numbers are also in Cali, Cartagena, and Barranquilla. Colombia is considered to have one of the largest Black African descent populations in the Western Hemisphere, following Haiti, Brazil, and the United States. But do you know what is the role of the Afro-Colombians in Colombian cultures? African Colombians have played a role in contributions to development of certain aspects of Colombian cultures. For example, several of Colombia's musical, such as cumbia and vallenato, have African origins or influence. Some African Colombians have also been successful in sports, as Oscar Figueroa and Patrocinio Bonilla. Have you ever heard before about San Basilio del Palenque? This is an Afro-Colombian town and hour from Cartagena, where the inhabitants are descendants of black slaves who came to work on the colony's plantations. But why is important this town? Well, the importance is because it's one of the places that had best and most preserved the heritage of those Maroons who rebelled against the slavery of the colonial era. Do you know that the Palenquera culture was declared an oral and intangible heritage of humanity in 2005? The reasons are because the music, the traditional medicines, and because the Palenquera language, a mixture of Spanish, Portuguese, and Bantu languages from West Africa.
Now let's talk about microracism. First of all, what does microracism mean? Microracism refers to the words and behaviors present in our daily lives that send discriminatory and segregatory messages to individuals that belong to a certain group. It is a very recent term which surfaces in modern society where racism, homophobia, and other forms of discrimination are not accepted, yet they still are present in unintended acts. Why is microracism bad? Microracism is hidden in the things we do and in how we behave every day, so we may not notice sometimes when we commit it. This kind of racism is harmful to the target person or group that suffers it, because we fail to recognize when the aggression happens most of the time, and when its existence is not acknowledged by everyone. The process of identifying it as a form of microaggression and raising awareness against it becomes much more difficult. The existence of microracism influences how people socialize with each other and also helps create negative stereotypes, which can also lead in more complex forms of racism like systemic racism, which is a form of racism that is present as a normal practice in society. Since these practices are seen as normal, we might think that these kinds of microracism acts are okay, but they are far more harmful to the people and society than we might think. Recognizing microracism is very important, so we know how to avoid it in the future. Let's look at some examples. Number one, thinking that people from other races or nationalities are delinquents. Number two, thinking that someone is more or less intelligent than anybody else because of their race or skin tone. Number three, comments like, "Oh, you're very good at this for someone that comes from this country," or, "Oh, hey, people of your race look more gorgeous and are more sexy," etc. These comments are one of the many examples you can find in today's society. There are still many ways where racism is present, especially micro-racism. The best thing we can do to contribute eradicating it is to learn about what is racism and when it happens. Spreading awareness helps a lot keeping racism from spreading.
We have now talked about racism and its ins and outs in Colombian society as documented by the news and other media. However, we did our own interview with people from around the country, and what we found is that most people have knowledge of racism, of the lack of possibilities and opportunities, and the backlash that Black people face, but are not educated in how to combat it or how to identify it within themselves. All of the interviewed expressed desire to help change the perspective society has on Black people, and that gives us hope that in the future these problems will be addressed accordingly. We thank everyone who listened to this educational podcast, and we hope that it will help in the way to a new and better future. Goodbye.